The city of Meridian ran on clockwork. Every building, every street, every bridge and fountain and lamp post was connected to the grand mechanism, a network of interlocking gears and steam conduits that powered the entire metropolis from a single enormous engine at its center. The engine had been running for 200 years, wound by teams of engineers who worked in shifts around the clock, feeding coal into furnaces that never cooled and maintaining gear trains that stretched for miles beneath the cobblestones. Meridian was the jewel of the mechanist empire, a testament to what human ingenuity could achieve when freed from the constraints of nature. The trees were brass. The birds were copper automata that sang on schedule. The river that ran through the city center had been channeled into a glass conduit and pressurized to drive secondary turbines. Everything served a function. Everything was designed. Nothing was left to chance. Sable Finch worked in a narrow workshop on Theorem Street, in the district where the map makers and instrument builders kept their shops. Her specialty was automaton cartography, the art of building small clockwork devices that could map terrain autonomously. She designed mechanical spiders that crawled across landscapes trailing ink on paper, recording elevation changes through spring-loaded pressure sensors and marking water features with blue pigment reservoirs. Her devices were elegant, precise, and increasingly unnecessary. The Empire had mapped everything. Every mountain, every valley, every river and coastline in the known world had been charted, catalogued, and filed in the Imperial Cartographic Archive. The age of exploration was over. The maps were done. But Sable kept building her mapping spiders anyway because she loved the work, because her hands needed to be busy, and because she harbored a suspicion that the maps were wrong. Suspicion had started 3 years ago, when one of her mapping spiders had returned from a survey of the Ironwood Forest with readings that contradicted the official maps. According to the archive, the forest's western boundary followed the Blackstone River for 47 miles before turning south. According to her spider's data, the boundary turned east, not south, and continued for an additional 12 miles into terrain that the official maps showed as empty grassland. Sable had assumed a malfunction. She had recalibrated the spider, sent it out again, and received the same results. She had then done something that cartographers in Meridian rarely did. She had gone to look for herself. She had traveled to the edge of the Ironwood Forest and walked the boundary, compass in hand, and confirmed with her own eyes that the forest extended 12 miles further than the maps claimed. The official maps of the Mechanist Empire, the most accurate maps ever produced, were wrong. Sable did not report her findings. In Meridian, contradicting an official record was a serious matter. The grand mechanism ran on precision. Every gear meshed with every other gear because every measurement was exact. An error in the maps implied an error in the system, and errors in the system were not tolerated. So instead, Sable began a private project. She built a new generation of mapping spiders, smaller and more accurate than anything she had made before, and sent them out across the Empire, one at a time, to remeasure everything. The data came back slowly, one spider returning every few weeks with its tiny rolls of inked paper. And as the data accumulated, Sable began to assemble a picture that was both fascinating and deeply troubling. The maps were not just wrong in one place. They were wrong everywhere. Every boundary, every coastline, every elevation reading was slightly off, as if the world itself had shifted since the original surveys were conducted, or as if the original surveys had been deliberately falsified. The most dramatic discrepancies were at the edges of the Empire, where the mapped world gave way to regions marked on the official charts as barren wasteland or toxic desert or impassable mountain range. In every case, Sable's spiders found something different. The barren wasteland on the eastern border was actually a temperate grassland with rivers and good soil. The toxic desert to the south was a salt flat, dry but perfectly safe, with a freshwater aquifer beneath it. The impassable mountains to the north had 3 navigable passes that the official maps omitted entirely. The pattern was consistent and unmistakable. The Empire's maps had been drawn to make the world outside the Empire appear uninhabitable. They were not errors. They were lies. Someone had deliberately falsified the boundaries to prevent the citizens of Meridian from knowing what lay beyond the borders. And the grand mechanism, which controlled the distribution of all official information, had enforced the lies for 200 years. Sable needed to see the original survey data. If the maps had been falsified, the alterations would be visible in the archive, where the raw measurements from the original survey teams were stored. Getting into the archive was not easy. It was housed in the most restricted section of the grand mechanism, behind doors that required 3 separate keys held by 3 separate officials. But Sable was a cartographer. She had spent her career building devices that could navigate difficult terrain. She built her smallest spider yet, no larger than a human thumbnail, equipped with a miniature camera obscura that could photograph documents and a spring-loaded return mechanism that would bring it back to her workshop after 12 hours. She released it into the ventilation system of the archive building on a Tuesday morning and waited. The spider returned with 47 photographs. Sable developed them in her darkroom and spread them across her workbench, magnifying glass in hand. What she found confirmed her worst fears and revealed something far more significant than she had imagined. The original surveys, conducted 200 years ago when the Empire was founded, showed the world as it actually was. Rich lands, navigable passes, habitable territories stretching far beyond the current borders. The surveys also showed something else. People. The original cartographers had documented the existence of communities living in the territories beyond the Empire's borders. Villages, towns, trading posts, farming settlements. Thousands of people who, according to the official maps, did not exist, living in lands that, according to the official maps, could not sustain life. The falsification hadn't just hidden territory. It had hidden an entire population. Sable could have taken her findings to the authorities. She could have petitioned the Mechanist Council, filed a formal complaint, worked through the official channels that the system provided for addressing grievances. But the system was the problem. The grand mechanism had been enforcing the false maps for 2 centuries. Going through official channels meant going through the very institution that had created and maintained the deception. So Sable did what cartographers do. She made a map. She spent 3 months compiling her data into a single, comprehensive chart of the real world. The true boundaries, the hidden territories, the communities that existed beyond the borders. She engraved the map onto copper plates with her own hands, using the same precision that she brought to her clockwork. Then she printed 1,000 copies on her workshop press and distributed them throughout Meridian in a single night, slipping them under doors, leaving them in coffee houses, posting them on walls, and dropping stacks of them from the Theorem Street Bridge into the crowds below. The reaction was immediate and exactly what Sable expected. The Mechanist Council declared the maps seditious material. The grand mechanism dispatched enforcement automata to confiscate every copy they could find. Sable's workshop was raided, and her equipment was destroyed. She herself was arrested and charged with dissemination of false information, which was ironic given that her information was the only true cartography Meridian had ever seen. But something the council hadn't anticipated happened alongside the crackdown. People looked at the maps before they were confiscated. They saw the territories, the passes, the settlements. They saw the lie. And in Meridian, where precision and accuracy were the highest values, where the entire civilization was built on the principle that every measurement must be exact and every record must be true, the revelation that the most fundamental records of all had been deliberately falsified struck at the heart of everything the citizens believed. You cannot build a city on clockwork precision and then reveal that the foundation is a lie. The gears don't mesh anymore. The trials lasted 6 months. Sable was acquitted, not because the council forgave her, but because the evidence was undeniable and the public would not accept a guilty verdict for telling the truth. The false maps were withdrawn. The borders were redrawn. The first expeditions to the hidden territories set out within the year, and they found everything Sable's spiders had documented and more. Communities that had been hidden behind the false maps for 200 years made contact with Meridian for the first time. Trade began. Cultural exchange began. The world grew larger overnight. Sable returned to her workshop on Theorem Street, which the citizens of the neighborhood had rebuilt during her imprisonment. She built new spiders. She drew new maps. And this time, when her maps contradicted the official records, people listened. The grand mechanism still ran. The gears still turned. The city still functioned on clockwork precision. But now the maps were true, and a city built on true maps could go anywhere. Sable's first new project was a map of the stars. She built a spider that could climb to the top of the tallest tower in Meridian and photograph the night sky with a miniature telescope. The resulting star chart was the most accurate ever produced. She published it freely, without restriction, with a note printed at the bottom in small, precise type. The truth is not a mechanism. It cannot be controlled by gears. It can only be found, recorded, and shared. This is the cartographer's duty, and it has no borders.